All right. Welcome all to a special episode, and it is a special episode of Date with a Debut. I'm Nick Wasiliev, host of the show. You know who I am, and I am here on Awabakal Country. And for today's episode, we're doing a first ever collaboration episode with another podcast. I am a massive lover of book podcasts as well as of books, and it's something that I've been wanting to do for a really long time. And today I have one of my absolute favorite podcasters here on the show. I'm joined by friend and fellow book lover and spruiker of the airwaves, the host of Talking Aussie Books, Claudine Tinellis. Claudine, welcome to Date with a Debut.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Nick. It's wonderful to be here.
If you don't know, Claudine, she hosts Talking Aussie Books, which I've been a fan of for many, many years. It is so lovely to have you here. You can check it out as well in the description. But on top of it, you've been involved with Northern Beaches Writers Festival. You've been a judge for the Newcastle Short Story Award among your many achievements. And one of the things I really want to ask you about is you're about to dive into the world of writing, aren't you? Because you've had a manuscript which is called The Pact to earn second place at Hawkeye Publishing Manuscript Development Prize, which was just last month. So we'll say you're busy. You've been taking care of business. Plenty of stuff going on.
I have been busy, Nick, and it's all been wonderful. Everything that has followed on from being the host of this podcast has opened up so many incredible opportunities for me. Being involved in literary festivals is just one of them, and judging short story prizes. I mean, I'm involved in one now for the Words Out West Festival. I'm judging their short story prize, both in the adult and youth category at the moment. And finding time to write in between all of that has kept me busy. I mean, The Pact is not my first manuscript, I've got to say. We were just talking about Matt Rogers and Matthew Riley a little bit earlier and off air, so to speak. But I think it's just de rigueur for writers to be, producing manuscripts that may not necessarily see the light of day. This is probably my 6th or 7th adult manuscript. I think I've lost count. There's quite a few in the drawer, but it has been wonderful to see The Pact find a receptive audience, and getting runner-up in the Hawkeye Manuscript Development Prize last month has just been incredible, and I'm so excited to see where this manuscript goes.
Well, I want to ask you a little bit more about it soon, but for everyone listening, we're going to kind of take a different approach to normal episodes, because we want to talk about not just, debut authors, but also the challenges of getting published, but where we see authors, debut authors in the publishing world kind of sitting in 2026, which sounds like a gargantuan conversation, but we will do our best because, we doing the shows we do, we have are lucky to kind of see the different authors coming through our door every week. But of course, let's start off by giving you your flowers, Claudine, because, for those who are not familiar, which I would be surprised if there isn't, Talking Aussie Books, one of the longest book podcasts that's been out there, I think over 320 episodes at the time of us recording. I tip my hat to you. Nearly a decade of amazing interviews. I've got to just ask off the bat, how the hell did that happen?
It is. I don't know if I ever told you this story before, Nick, but it was really one of the most impulsive things I've ever done. But essentially, as I just mentioned, I've been writing for quite some time. But I think at that stage of my life, I think I'd been out of the law for some time, and I just decided I wasn't going to go back to being a lawyer, and I'd always wanted to try my hand at writing. I think even when I was a lawyer, I always put up my hand for those tasks that were, write an article for this, scholarly magazine, or this, practice update or whatever. And I'd always be saying, yes, I want to do that. And I think there was some kind of lure of having my name on the byline that really, really appealed to me. And anyway, so, fast forward, I'm, at home looking after 3 children, doing school runs and looking after elderly parents. And in the cracks of time, I, was trying to write a novel. I was very unsuccessful in those early days. It just wasn't working for me, and so I did a masterclass in commercial fiction, which many listeners may have heard of. It's the Fiona McIntosh Commercial Fiction Masterclass, which she runs out of Adelaide. I did that in 2017, and that was a wonderful introduction to writing commercial fiction. It was the wake-up call I needed. I knew I needed to learn a lot more. And in that, in furtherance of that objective, I started listening to podcasts. Now, at that stage, 2017, 2018, early 2018, I would say, podcasts were really new to me. I didn't really know much about them, but everybody started talking about podcasts, and there were a few terrific ones, terrific Australian ones around at the time. But I found that I wasn't getting the information I wanted from those podcasts. And essentially, I wanted to hear from Australian authors about how they got their start, where they get their ideas from, how do they go about getting a publishing deal. And I knew a few Australian authors by that stage. I made a number of connections through the Fiona McIntosh Commercial Fiction Masterclass. We all get tipped into a Facebook alumni group once you finish the masterclass. And so, I started to see that there were some familiar names in there, people who were already published and people who, were already successful. And so I decided that I would reach out. Oh, no, go back a step. I knew that I knew these people. And so when I just realized that I wasn't getting the information I wanted from podcasts that were already in existence, I decided to start my own. And it was like a really split second random decision. I was just going to, I'll start my own podcast. And so that's really how it was. I knew a couple of people. I approached them and I said, look, I'm thinking of doing this. I have no idea if anyone's going to listen. Would you be prepared to talk to me? Everyone I approached was, yeah, of course, no problem. And it just went from there. It honestly and it was just, the more people I spoke to, the more people I was introduced to, my circle grew wider, my network grew wider, and I started to, just to get to know more people. And then in 2020, everybody knew what happened in 2020. And suddenly we had all these authors who had no way of, reaching their readers. Bookshops were closed, libraries were closed, events were shut down. Nobody could do any events. And suddenly I was in a position where I had a platform and people needed a way to reach their readers. And so I think 2019 was a really good year for me. I got to interview people like Trent Dalton. I got to interview Holly Ringland. I got to interview Jane Harper, or it might have, been sort of in the lead up to 2020 as well. And I think people just started going, I think she knows what she's doing. Yeah, why don't we reach out and talk to her? So 2020, 2021, 2022, the podcast really kind of exploded from there. And so I think a bit like you, Nick, there is, when you see that there's a demand and that people, publishers want a way to be able to help promote their authors want a way to help, to promote their books, to reach their audiences. There is a demand there. And as long as there is a demand, I've been able to keep going with doing what I'm doing. And I find myself, like you say, 320 episodes and counting.
Which is so cool. It's such a cool milestone. And I love that you kind of discovered a need. And I also love the fact, first of all, that it was a split-second decision that is now 10 years old. And then second of all, that, of course, I will say, we love chatting to the authors. We love doing it. But let's not lie. We're also doing market research for our own writing. And we are absolutely... The amount of times I've said to authors on a podcast, I'm going to have to steal some of this. Because some of your ideas are brilliant. It is absolutely true that actually starting a podcast and talking with authors and how they did their creative process has been incredibly helpful for me. And I'd imagine it's the same for you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It has been incredibly helpful. I would say that it has opened my eyes to the difficulty and the difficulty of getting published in a lot of ways, and also the work that's required. It's hard, and I think Yeah, there's no getting away from the fact that you've just got to put your bum on that seat. You've got to glue your bum there and get the work done. And yeah, I think that's the biggest takeaway that I've had from speaking to all the authors that I have over the last however many years. Yeah.
Absolutely. And God, it's opened some doors for you. As you kind of alluded to, you've been able to work covering festivals, judging events. You're now, of course, yourself diving into writing. I mean, uh, it's a great way also to keep in touch with the pulse of the industry as well, because there's so many different publishing houses and things going on. There's things happening in different parts of the world that find their way here. And it's also shown, doing shows like this has shown me where Australia really sits, and that we actually command a lot of, the voice that we actually have. People are really interested in what Australian readers have to say, and it's not a surprise that so many of those books go overseas and do really, really well. Out of curiosity, and it's a question I love to ask, authors about, at the end of talking about their book, but it's a great opportunity to do this with a fellow podcaster. What is actually doing the show? First of all, what has it given you, and what did the exercise of doing this show teach you? Be it Claudine the human, Claudine the writer, Claudine the podcaster, the human on this planet.
What the show has given me has been an incredible network of people that I now am lucky enough to call friends. That's the reality. I came into the industry, I went into that Fiona McIntosh commercial fiction masterclass not really knowing anybody, not really knowing anyone in the industry, feeling really rather like, a shag on a rock. I honestly didn't. I just thought I'm not even really sure I'm in the right place here, and I'm not even really sure if anything I do will ever succeed. And I came away from that masterclass with a group of people who were kind of, in a similar position that I am. Some of us were a little bit further along in our journey than others, and it just sort of created that camaraderie. And then starting the podcast and getting to know all these wonderful people, I think has really just given me this incredible network. I can't describe it in any other way. There's rarely a place that I go to that I don't know people. I haven't interviewed somebody in that sort of crowd of people, and people remember me. People, will always come up and say hello to me. And, oh, I remember when we chatted for the podcast, and, oh, that was my first podcast. We were talking about this earlier. I interviewed a lot of people, and it was their first time talking on a podcast, and so their experience with me was quite memorable just for that fact alone. And so I have met publishers, I've met agents, network and community. And I think that's the biggest thing for me. It has given me this community of people. I used to drag my husband along to all these events that I wanted to go to, and I was too mortified to go by myself. And I used to say, please just come with me. I don't want to walk into this room on my own. And now I very rarely have to walk into a room on my own. There's always somebody that I know is going to some event that I'm going to, and we inevitably will meet up and, maybe go for dinner afterwards or have a drink beforehand. And I really love that. And so that's the biggest thing that the podcast has given me. In terms of what I've learnt from the podcast, gosh, I've learnt patience. I've learnt that everybody you speak to is fighting an invisible battle with something. And you don't necessarily know what that is. It could be anxiety. It could be crippling anxiety. It could be lack of self-confidence, or just, terrible experiences that they've been able to put on the page, vulnerability. So I always approach an interview thinking I might know, I know a lot about the author because I've had to do my research and I've read the book, and oftentimes that person's heart and that person's feelings and souls are imbued on the page, in the words on the page of that beautiful book that it's found its way into the world. And so I do approach each interview, I hope, with sensitivity, with patience, with humility, and I want to give each person the opportunity and the space to tell their story in a way that feels comfortable for them. And that requires me to be patient. It requires me to listen. and not just, go out there and ask my questions, bang, 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 get that done. I need to give that process time and respect. And I think that's what I've learnt most of all, that everybody has their own story and everybody brings a different experience to sitting there at that moment and about to talk to me.
That is a fantastic answer to that question. And it's, I think, yes, a great point, the value of listening, which I think is, there's a lot of power in that. There's a lot of amazing things life skills that you can take on beyond that. And it's wonderful that the podcast and this exercise has given you that, which is amazing. And I will also add, let's talk about it now, that in addition to that, it's finally meant that you have completed a manuscript, which was a runner-up at with the Hawkeye Publishing Manuscript Award. I'm so excited to hear about the pact. I know nothing. All I have is the name. Please tell me how things are going. Like, will we see a book? And if we do see a book, I would love to just ask for an elevator pitch. I would love to hear more.
I'm actually really gun-shy about talking about it, Nick. And the reason is because it's currently out on submission. And so I'm a little bit nervous about talking about it because I kind of don't want to jinx myself.
Fair.
But what I can say is that after so many manuscripts that haven't, either gone anywhere, done well, been rejected, and like so many authors I'm sure that you've spoken to, writing comes with a level of expectation in terms of rejections. And so I've had my fair share of rejections. But in 2023, I wrote another manuscript called The Forgotten. And that manuscript came out of COVID experiences of doing a lockdown walk in my local area, and I stumbled upon an old cemetery and, thought, what's this cemetery all about? And what if there was somebody, it's an old sort of abandoned cemetery. And anyway, not to talk about that manuscript more than necessary, but essentially that manuscript landed me an agent. And I was extremely excited about that because I thought, this is what I need. I need somebody who can dispassionately and sort of act for me at arm's length, because I think people in our situation, we know so many people, and I know a lot of publishers. I know a lot about what goes on in the publishing industry. Talking to publicists within publishers a lot of the time, and so I felt like I felt like I didn't have that sort of arm's length sort of relationship with them that was necessary for me to be able to advocate for myself in these scenarios. And so I thought an agent was the best way for me to go. And so I was very grateful and very happy to have landed an agent in 2024. Sadly, that manuscript that went out on submission didn't actually go anywhere. And call it timing, call it sort of bad luck, whatever, or, maybe the story just wasn't for any of those publishers for whatever reason. I decided I wasn't going to wait around. I just needed to move on and work on another manuscript. So I started, and I'm very much like that. If I feel like something's not going very well, I just go, okay, that's it. I'm just going to draw a line under that and just move on to the next project. So, and I guess that's probably why I've got so many manuscripts in my drawer. So I'm always writing, despite the fact that I'm podcasting and doing all these other things. I am always writing. Anyway, so 2024 sort of came and went, and the beginning of 2025 came, and my daughter, my youngest child, who was 18 at the time, accepted a university offer in Canberra and was moving out of home. I live in Sydney, and I thought I was going to be the parent that was going to push my kids out the door. Like, yep, you're 18, see you later, kid. I've got other things going on. But it came as a great surprise to me, as I'm sure, my family as well, that I was not okay with this decision of my daughter's to move. I was happy for her, and I was delighted that she was following her dreams and her passion. But I, in my private moments, felt quite a lot of grief around this. And I struggled to come to terms with the fact that she was my youngest and she was my only daughter, and suddenly she was no longer at home. And the idea for the pact came to me in that moment. I saw my opening scene, and the opening scene was my character, whose name is Rita, fussing around in her daughter's dorm room and helping her pack all these things away, and the moment where she needs to sort of gather her courage and say goodbye to her daughter and drive 3 hours back home to Sydney. And essentially, that's the story. The story is about this woman who is grieving the end of her parenting years. She's suddenly an empty nester, which I'm not. So this isn't my story, but it served as a springboard for the story that I wanted to tell about this mother grieving the loss of, those motherhood years, coming to terms with who she was as a person, how she moves forward with her life, and what does that look like. And in the process, I explore things like cultural identity. I explore her relationship with religion, and also, her as a sexual being. She was a single mother and she raised this child on her own. And who does she become? Does she want a partner? Does she want to, find love and happiness after all this time of being on her own, or is she happy on her own? I don't know. So these were all the things that I wanted to explore in this story without giving you the actual storyline. I hope I've given you enough to go on.
You have given me so much to go on, and that book sounds incredible. I think also it highlights a quiet moment of having to say goodbye to a child when they're a grown adult and they go and become their own person, which is a very hard thing to do. I still remember when I went off on gap year, the hug that my mum gave me before she went off to the airport. Like, I still remember it. Like, it was a different sort of hug. It was a sort of hug that had a lot of emotion behind it, and I still remember it. Like, so that sounds like a book that should be out there in the world, and I'm crossing all the fingers and all the toes that this time it is successful. And if it is, you're coming back on the show. We'll just say that. You're coming back on the show and we're going to talk about it in more detail, which I really am excited for. But I hope it does. And I'm so excited to continue listening to Talking Aussie Books and all the amazing other episodes that you'll have coming down the pipeline.
Thanks, Nick. Thank you. And just picking up on that point about you remembering that hug, I think the other thing that was interesting to me about writing the pact was I got married at 23 and I, lived at home right up until the day I got married. And I remember my parents struggling to come to terms with the fact that their oldest child was no longer under their roof. And, I never gave my parents a thought when I left. Do you know what I mean? And I think now I look back on that and I think, oh, that was so cruel. I was so cruel to them about it. I was so, I just sort of trotted off, bye-bye, ta-ta, see you later, and didn't give them a thought about, how they might be feeling. But now I can, with the benefit of hindsight and the benefit of maturity and 3 kids, I can definitely see that, it is a moment for grief. Of course, every parent is happy for their children to move on and become independent adults, but there's always just that little piece of your heart that sort of, can never come back to you once they're gone.
Absolutely. And this is another reason why I'm really hoping this book is successful, because it sounds like a very interesting and juicy subject matter to examine and dissect. Ad break time. Stop the podcast. Hey everyone, just thought I'd stop to let you know that today's episode is sponsored by Podpixels, the Trent Dalton of professional podcast platforms. Question: do you have a desire for a great podcast? How are you going to build it? What about the design work? Won't it cost a fortune? Fear not, for Podpixels is a simple, done-for-you website service built specifically for podcasts. They are here to deliver that professional look to your podcast to make it easier for listeners to find your show, and all for one great monthly price. From hobbyists to pros, Podpixels has you covered. Their team provides domains, website hosting, backup, security, and support, handling the full setup and making sure that your show is up to date and allowing you to focus on what you do best, podcast. With Podpixels, you can achieve your full podcasting vision. They are the ultimate one-stop solution for anyone looking to build an online home for their podcast. Check them out below in the show notes and tell them that Nick from Date with a Debut sent you. Thank you, Podpixels, for sponsoring the show. As part of one of the joys of us kind of doing this cool collaboration, we're going to bounce back and forth in terms of, the format that Claudine does with her show and, of course, with me with Date with the Debut. And, of course, being book podcasts, we have to recommend some books. Like, we absolutely do. So we've gone out and we've said to each other, as long as it's a debut, given following the theme, this is a books that we're going to recommend. So we've brought 2 books along with us that we're going to talk about. And I think the best place to start is with you, Claudine. What books have you been reading and that you've brought along today?
Well, as you know, Nick, always reading some fantastic Australian books. But one that really stood out to me was one that I read out at the end of last year. And it was a book by Rebecca Armitage. Now, Rebecca is an ABC journalist who is based in Hobart in Tasmania. And her debut novel, The Heir Apparent, I absolutely devoured this book. And I was very lucky to have been able to interview Rebecca for both the podcast and an event down on the New South Wales South Coast. Now, this book basically follows a 29-year-old doctor by the name of Lexi. She's working in Hobart in a hospital, and I think when it opens, she's just about to kiss her best friend, who I believe is a farmer, and a helicopter comes into view, and this helicopter is essentially a member of the British royal family, or an aide to the British royal family, has come to collect her because there's been a tragic accident. Her brother, the king, her brother, the prince, and her father, the king, have both been killed in a tragic accident, and she is next in line to the throne. So she's picked up, she's whisked away, and essentially she is been given a year to decide whether or not she is going to take up the baton and become the next Queen of England. And it is the most incredible story. And it was also very incredible. Well, sorry, it is also incredible because it was named the Reese's Book Club pick of December 2025. And that in itself just sort of catapulted this book into the stratosphere of book fame. So it was published in the UK and I think in America and here. And guys, if anyone is a fan of the royal family, or not, even if you're not a fan of the royal family, but you're a fan of all that sort of like the machinations and want to understand all the sort of, the juicy details behind the scenes, Rebecca is very well informed. She has written about the royal family in the past. She's covered, royal weddings and I think even the Queen's funeral, I think. So she's very well versed in all of these sort of details, and it is a cracker of a read.
This is the book of all the ones that we're going to talk about today that I don't know anything about. Like, I do know about Rebecca, and I also knew that this book was in Reese's Book Club because, it's whenever a book like that comes out, it makes a big splash in the literary world. But I need to check that out because I didn't know anything about it until you just pitched it to me. So it's now going to add this to my TBR pile that's taller than my house. So it feels like you've sold me on this one. I mean, there's so many good journos on the ABC that have actually put out a couple of books. I mean, spoke with Michael Bressenden did one relatively recently as well. But it sounds great, particularly like all the intricacies. I'd imagine my mind immediately went to The Crown because I've watched The Crown plenty of times and how much detail that they have in there and all the protocols and elements of that and also how restrictive that would be. That sounds like a fascinating premise.
A cracking read, absolutely. Even if, like I said, even if you aren't a particularly, avid fan of the royal family, or you're a Republican, I think it's fascinating reading, irrespective.
Absolutely. My first book is one that you've had this author on your show as well as I have. So this has been one of my favorite books of the year so far, and that is When the Party's Over by Katie Hoskins. And it is a fantastic deep dive into friendships, parenting, lying, the consequences of lying to each other, and then there is so much to dissect in this book. And first and foremost, it starts with this group of friends. There's a massive party happening at someone's house. They're having a great night out. But then it gets out of control. It's people in their mid-30s, all with kids, who are having the chance to let loose and have a good time. But then when Natalie, it was her birthday in the start of the book, wakes up, she discovers the following day that one of her children who has a pill in their mouth, and a quarter of the pill is missing. We do not know what this pill is. Immediately, the kid is taken to hospital and turns out okay. But this entire situation creates a chain reaction within the community. And the whole premise and initial reaction is people saying, how could a mother let this happen to their child? So it's a deep dive examination into the pressure that is placed on women, particularly around parenting, but also all of her best friends, Mandy and Lisa, are also dealing with repercussions of their own from this party. It is a fantastic and brilliant and loaded examination into, suburban life, the challenges that you have with parenting, but also I think ultimately it's a realization as well about realizing what you do have and versus what you don't have, because there's a lot of comparison between these people as well. And I love books that hit you across the face, like get you right into it. So this was absolutely my jam.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Katie is a very adept writer, and this book really just threw you straight into the action and really, I think, challenged everyone to think, what would you do in that situation? Like obviously as a mother, I would be horrified if somebody who was in my home had bought, some drugs along to the house and, one of my children picked that up, horrified. But also there's sort of, the fallout of that for Natalie, in terms of her social standing, not only amongst her friends, but also, the school community that she was part of, the judgment that she faced and the backlash was just awful. And, what would we do in that scenario? I don't know. I really don't know. So it was very, very interesting reading and a very satisfying read, I have to say.
It talked about stuff that I think needed to be talked about, particularly because we've got a generation of people who've grown up on the internet who are now all having kids and learning about this kind of environment and challenges. It's a great book. I think it's been getting a lot of acclaim, and I think with good reason. And it's a great deep dive into parenting and the challenges of being a mum.
Yep, couldn't agree with you more. And the fact that it's set in my local area where I live just sort of gave it bonus points for me. I absolutely adore this. I adore books where I can recognise the setting and I can go, oh, I've been there. I've been down there. And oh, I've been down there. And you can almost imagine the characters walking alongside you. That's it's a thrill for me to read books like that. So, yeah, bonus points to Katie for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the great thing as well is that because there's so many different characters also getting across there, also dealing with their own issues, either around parenting or being a woman, it makes it even more fascinating and gives you that amazing contrast. So yeah, great book.
Absolutely. Yeah. So my second book is a book that's only recently been launched, and it's called Solo Mum by Choice by Lorena Oates. Now, it's published by Hawkeye Publishing, and this is not a fiction book, it's a memoir, and essentially it is a book which details Lorena's decision to become a solo mum by choice by having IVF in order to conceive her daughter. And I think, talking about parenting, I think this is a book that really makes you face, that whole age-old question about whether or not, as a single person, you bring a child into the world and what kind of world you're bringing them into. All the decisions all those sort of things that Lorena had to think about in terms of deciding to go down this route when she was, already in her 40s. I found so incredibly fascinating and moving. And she went through, I think, something like 13 rounds of IVF to conceive her daughter. and the emotional, the physical, the financial toll that process took on her, the support that she needed. It all just makes for an incredibly emotional and beautiful read. And I was so very honoured to be at her book launch last Sunday, and to see her surrounded by the people that supported her during that journey, in particular her beautiful parents, and to see her beautiful daughter, running around at the centre was just gorgeous. This is a beautiful, beautiful story, an ultimately hopeful story, obviously, because Lorena ended up with a beautiful daughter. But it also enables people to sort of understand, the choice that she made and the thinking along the lines, throughout that whole journey, even though she hates the word journey. There's really no other way to describe it, but such an incredibly vulnerable and honest read. I absolutely adored it, and I hope other readers will too.
I'm so glad that there are books like this out there. Not just I've had several friends who've gone the IVF route, and it is intense and expensive and traumatic and difficult, particularly if you have, if the first round doesn't work, and it puts the pressure and the intensity that you feel on it. So I'm glad that there's a book out there. And I'm also, I know that, solo mums, people choosing to have IVF as a solo mum is becoming increasingly common. I see this kind of book as really smashing some stereotypes about the idea of family, which I think is really, really something that needs to happen. And I think it's great that Lorene. I can imagine it would have been such a difficult book to write and put onto the page, but I'm glad that a book like this exists, because it really, it opens up the idea of having a family, and it opens up the idea and the challenges that come with it, but also the intense joy that is also part of it.
Indeed, an absolutely stunning read.
It's good that you mentioned Lorena Oates, because as part of the show that I do, I always often like to ask authors who appear on the show, what books they've been reading and they've been enjoying. And Solo Mum by Choice was actually recommended to me by my last recommendation, who literally was just on the show at the time of me recording earlier this week, and that is Melissa Sharman. And I love that you and I both went with a memoir for our second pick. Melissa's book, The Beauty of Broken Things, is, Melissa's story is incredible. She is a woman who has overcome incredible adversity. So she grew up in an incredibly religious family. At one point in her, when she was a teenager, she actually was assaulted by Brett Cowan, the man who would actually go on to murder Daniel Morecambe, which was a very, intense part of, just imagining that, being in that situation is incredible. And then she also dealt with a very abusive relationship for over a decade of her life. And this story, but this is not a sad book. While it comes with a lot of trigger warnings, this is not a sad story, and I really need to kind of push this from chatting with her. Melissa has turned these challenges and done something amazing with her life. So she founded Egg Donation Australia, kind of off the back of IVF. She had, many of her friends struggled with IVF, and so she decided to found Egg Donation Australia. She has helped bring in 23 children into the world, either through egg donation or surrogacy of her own, herself, for 14 families. She helped change legislation in Queensland Parliament around domestic violence laws, and through submitting a petition that received over 100,000 signatures. She currently works at a women's refuge as well. This woman has turned the challenges of her life and spun it into doing incredible good in the world. And her memoir, again, touching on the theme of the beauty of broken things, she has taken the life that she had, which kind of really broke her down, and made something wonderful out of it. And it is an intense read. It is a hard read. It comes with a lot of warnings, but I think it's a read that you should read at least once because it highlights what you can actually accomplish and how strong and resilient the human spirit can be. This book floored me. Absolutely floored me, Claudine. It was amazing.
I'm so glad to hear you say that because I have Melissa's book right here in front of me and I'm desperate to get to it. I'm desperate to read it. Not just because it deals with hard themes, but because of the woman that she is and the woman, the strength of character and of determination that she had in order to be able to write her story. And she's, and to see it through to publication as well is incredible. I'm very much looking forward to reading her story. I found it very interesting, Nick, that we've chosen debuts by women. All of both of our choices are women. I mean, I read a lot. Most of the books that I read are written by women, and I don't know why that is. It's mostly what's sent to me, or mostly what's pitched to me, mostly what I gravitate towards. So I found your choices really inspiring.
Well, for me, I think, those are the books that have. I mean, I've enjoyed every book that's come through the show this year. I've been very lucky to have either, books from small publishing houses all the way to your big ones. I think when I kind of just thought about this question when we talked about debuts to bring, these ones, the great thing about doing the show is that it means I would tackle genres and stuff that previously I wouldn't have, which is why I've, over the last 12 to 18 months really gained a new appreciation for stuff like romance and fantasy, which is something I've traditionally found hard to get into. I love books that hit me across the face and really hold me. And these two books in particular did. There's so many great female writers out there, which I absolutely love. And that's not to say that, if there's not amazing male writers out there too, there definitely are.
Of course.
But these two, they touched and gave me the chance to learn about things that I'm glad I learnt about, I think. And it's something, I think they made me walk a mile in their shoes, which I loved. And I'm glad that I went on that journey.
Yeah, fantastic. Love it. Nick, so moving on from our book recommendations, you and I, as we've already said, we speak to so many authors, and I feel like at the moment there's quite a lot of negativity around the industry. We've got the challenge that AI poses and the threat that it poses to authors and the suspicion that it casts over the industry now. But there's also the sense that perhaps people aren't reading as much now as they did beforehand, and therefore there's less opportunity for writers to break in. But at the same time, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, objectively speaking, it's never been easier to be published. I mean, people can choose to indie publish. There's a few hybrid publishing models around. We can pitch to digital first publishers. And especially here in Australia where writers don't necessarily need an agent to be able to pitch their work to publishers. And so you and I see every day that people are still breaking through. I mean, you based your whole show on the fact that people are breaking through all the time. And I too am always interviewing debut authors. So in relation to the authors that are having success, do you think there are any commonalities, anything that you could point to that suggests where the industry interest lies or where reader interest lies, or is it random?
This is a big question, and I appreciate the chance to talk to you about it because we're lucky that we get the chance to chat to so many authors and get sort of different perspectives on it. The industry is in such an interesting place right now. I think that there's been so many discussions around kind of the status that AI will have and the impact that AI will have. I think that particularly, and I will kind of preface that I've got all I can give is my own opinion on it. There's been the whole controversies around, the impact of AI books, and there's of hearing stories about how when one famous author publishes a book, a bunch of people publish 3 books, which are summaries of the book through feeding their book through an AI filter and trying to publish 2 or 3 books to try and scalp off their earnings on opening day. And then there's the whole controversy around Shy Girl, which kind of really gripped the industry and kind of brought a whole bunch of topics and discussions to the forefront, which I have a whole bunch of other opinions on that. But I do think it is the concerns about people reading less is true. I think it's the nature of with the increasing crazy world that is social media, people's attention spans are getting shorter. But I do think that there is a growing interest in. I think that it would be wrong to assume that books are on the ropes, because we do have this amazing thing, for example, called BookTok, which I think has become the new book recommendation section of this generation. It's kind of like recommending. It's the new word of mouth in a way. It's just online. It's in a different environment. It's why you're seeing so many authors like Emily Henry or Taylor Jenkins Reid or Australian contemporaries blowing up because the moment that they get really popular on there and people recommend, this book was amazing, it blew my mind, check out this amazing scene, these amazing scenes like chapter 41 from A Court of from Sarah J. Maas's debut. The moment that you have that sort of discourse and discussion, it encourages people to go and check out the books for themselves. So I think that we're sitting in an interesting place. I think right now, the industry has always been kind of one. I think it's also one of those industries where it's predominantly female driven as well, which kind of going back to the topic about about male and female writers and stuff. I think it's one of those few industries where I think a lot of it is driven by women. It's also a situation where the industry is really it's having to adapt very, very quickly. There's the traditional publishing model. Has been around for so many years, but in a time that we live in, it has to adapt increasingly so, because the world that we're living in is very different to what the traditional model was working in. I think that you are absolutely right. It has never been easier to be published. There is nothing wrong either. I think the stigma around indie publishing or custom publishing is rapidly deteriorating. People want to take their own, control of their own destinies in that sort of regard. I think that is something that is an option available to people. I do think that one of the side effects of BookTok is that it prioritizes things like your romance, like your fantasy. I think that's in some of those instances, it does put other genres, maybe even have them on the run a little bit. I love literary fiction. I love deep dives into literary fiction. I love psychological thrillers. Thrillers can do well on TikTok, but even like more horror. Horror is seen as a bit of a taboo word, I'd argue, in online these days, because people are like, oh, it's intense subject matter, we're not going to talk about it. But there are amazing horror books out there that dive into that sort of stuff. There are amazing literary books that dive into that sort of stuff out there. I think there is, I like the idea that BookTok is getting people to read. That's what I'm really excited about. And if you get that bug, it definitely provides that, and it gets readers excited. I also am hoping that it can be used as a tool, for example, to open up people's interest beyond the world of just, those popular books that are really, really good. And discovering there is few things more enjoyable than discovering an author at the start of their career with their debut novel and following that career and seeing where they go. There's been so many authors who I've had the privilege of interviewing who have now gone on and achieved huge success. I mean, the first one that I interviewed, I remember interviewing Lynette Noni for the first, and look how big she is now. She is absolutely killing it with her series, like talking about The Prison Healer. We were there at the beginning, back in Booktopia days. So I think it's the interest in kind of answer this question. It's such a big question, and I'm sorry for rambling on, but I think it's easier to get published than ever. It's harder in this kind of environment where you've not only got the pressure of something like AI, but also keeping people's attention as much so. The whole idea of a book is hold my attention. It's kind of does it hard. It's the art form that does it more than anyone else. But I think it's harder to cut through. But in saying that, it's also never been an easier time to get started in that sort of sense.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think you've distilled it accurately. I think it is easier to get started and easier to get published, but breaking through and finding success is very difficult. And I think that's where you and I come in, where we sort of aids to the Australian publishing industry in many ways and trying to support and promote particularly new authors, but also mid-list authors who struggle to sort of break into that sort of next level. And I think BookTok, you're absolutely right. I think BookTok is a terrific tool. I just wish BookTokers would focus more on Australian titles, because this is my shtick. This is what I'm all about. I'm all about supporting Aussie authors, as you are too, Nick. And I think that I would love to see something like BookTok really focusing on Australian titles, or the BookTokers, or the Australian BookTokers, because the reality is, as much as I love and enjoy international titles, I just picked up Lily King's Heart the Lover the other day after seeing her open the Sydney Writers' Festival. I love, jumping on the bandwagon of all of these, big international selling titles. But the reality is, they don't need our support.
No. No.
The reality is, Australian authors need our support. Australian authors need Australian readers to get behind them. And, we need to be buying Australian. We need to be supporting our local industry and make our industry thrive. As much as I love, and I'm sure I'm going to love Lily King, and I love Emily Henry, and I read so many other, international authors, but they're already successful. So we need to think about that as well.
The good thing is, as well, I can say with confidence, like off the back of that, I think it's kind of making that connection between, the environment of going, often maybe some BookTokers will pursue one particular title because it's popular to do so. That's why you see Sarah J. Maas and Taylor Jenkins Reid and Emily Henry kind of plastered up in lights so often, because often those books do very, very well with the algorithm. But I do think you're absolutely right. There's something, and I can say with confidence that if, a BookToker started to do that, if BookTokers did kind of say, here's an author that I don't know about that I think is really, really interesting. The great thing is that there are a lot of good authors out there that are getting published, that are Australian authors who are writing books of substance that, we've talked about 4 just literally off the cuff right now in this podcast, but there are so many authors out there whose books that I think are worth your time. Because if you love a good romance, I've had so many amazing romances come on the show this year. Bridie Blake, Amanda Hewitt. Bridie Blake's book was excellent, the Boyfriend Clause, which I'm so excited. She's just recently signed a new deal as well. That book made me laugh. That opening scene is one of the best scenes I've ever read in a romance book, period. It was phenomenal. It made me cack myself laughing. And again, it kind of shows to me that, hopefully if people start to focus more on the local level, and not have, those kind of authors, because it's so hard to get that cut through. If BookTokers can get that sort of cut through, it changes the game completely for your debut novelists or your novelists that have published a great book and build up that audience. The good thing is as well is that, with a debut, you've just got that first book. As you start to build on that catalogue, it kind of hopefully creates a snowball effect as well. Actually, out of curiosity, like where are debut voices in 2026 in your opinion? Because what sort of trends are you seeing, with the kinds of books that are being published by debuts, whether it be Australian or, international? But of course, we're on the Australian pulse per se. But what are you seeing from a debut perspective?
What I'm seeing and what I'm really loving is own voices stories. So I'm loving stories that draw on people's own experiences, now, whether that's, their own cultural experiences or, just the way that they identify. I think these are the stories that I'm really leaning into at the moment, and mostly because that's what I'm writing. And for the very longest time, I thought I had to write in a particular way in order to get a publisher's attention. And then over the last few years, I've really seen a rise in these own voices stories that tell about average Australian experiences, but from different perspectives. Now, whether that's, queer stories, or whether it's, stories from different sort of cultural identities, or, family stories that, don't fit the norm, all of those things, they're the stories that I'm really leaning into. And even, so to speak, people with particular, specialties, people that, have experience in certain areas, medical experiences or legal knowledge, people who draw on their own experiences and then create something and put it into a book, I think is what is really resonating with me. And I think publishing is starting to respond. I mean, they have. And look, we just saw that Angie Faye Martin, a brilliant debut novelist, has just taken out the ARBIA Award for the Best New Writer. I think the ARBIAs were last night.
I lose track of where they start.
Yeah. I think I saw all the announcements coming through last night. I mean, own voices story, an Indigenous, from an Indigenous perspective, a brilliant story. We need more of this. This is what we need. And I think publishing has been a little bit slow to the party in this regard. But I'm loving this direction.
I will say, if you're looking, I completely agree. Like, particularly when I like to coil it. There's a phrase that is described as it's called a yoink and twist, where like someone takes something or like an established genre or whatever, and then puts their own perspective and color and view on it. Sometimes it can they deliberately directly reference it, or sometimes it's a play on established genres and tropes and stuff. Off the back of your point, I was thinking about some great books that have kind of come through which have that own voice. Anything out of the sweatshop literary movement, I have been devouring. Like Dani Nor's memoir, How to Dodge Flying Sandals and Other Advice for Life. Natalia Figueroa.
I love that title.
Oh, yeah, it's so good. Natalia Figueroa Barroso's Hailstones Fell Without Rain, which is the first Spanglish novel published in Australia as well. In addition to that, Alejandro Martinez's Salsa in the Suburbs, which kind of also talks about, they're both from Uruguay, and their books touch on the fallout of the dictatorship in Uruguay. I love those books. Half Truth, Nadia Majuri, she's a Tasmanian writer, but with her book kind of talks about Moroccan heritage, and that's a fantastic book and dives into that culture, which in ways that I didn't experience before. And I mean, the big one that has consistently been coming back to me time and time again is The Butterfly Women by Madeline Cleary, which has been a fantastic. If you have not read this, historical deep dive into the world of Little Lon, and it follows a serial killer, so there's a crime element to it, but there's also shows what historical novel that also shows what women went through living in colonial Melbourne. You can do a tour of it now. It is such an interesting book, so much research, so much detail, beautifully written and put together. It's been the book that has come back to me so many times. Even getting into genres like Jessica Mansour-Nara's The Farm. Her voice is amazing. It's kind of a thriller, psychological thriller set in the country, but it's kind of a bit of a deep dive as well into the challenges of kind of going back to fertility issues, which is a topic which is affecting a lot of people. There is no shortage of great yoinks and twists on established genres and people putting their own voice in it. That's where a lot of joy for debuts for me is that you've got your own, like, people are putting their own voice out there for the first time, and your voice, your natural voice, can build on the establishments of genres and topics and particular subject matter in unique and exciting ways. That's where the real excitement is for me, particularly doing this show, is that you'll have a great historical novel like Emma Payne's When Sleeping Women Wake, and that talks brilliantly about the world of Hong Kong during the Second World War, gave me insights into things I didn't know about, and
Yes.
historical elements that I didn't know about. And there is so much joy in diving into that. And yeah, that's what I'm optimistic about. The good thing is, if you give those books half a chance, they will win you over very, very quickly.
Yes, I agree. There are no shortage. And just to add my, selection, we've got anything by Shankari Chandran. We've got Aisha Inoon. We have Tess Woods. We have, I was thinking Winnie Dunn, Dirt Poor Islanders, that was shortlisted for the Miles Franklin Award last year. We have anything by Michael Muhammad Ahmed. His writing is incredible. There's no shortage, and yet I feel like, these stories, apart from Shankari Chandran, I think these stories are slow to find their audience, but we really need to be supporting these authors as much as we can.
Is that the solution then, in your opinion, to kind of the challenges that debut authors face? I mean, there is the whole other topic of AI, which I'm curious about how that is going to pan out, because the more I see the impact of AI, the more I think to myself that inevitably it's going to affect so many people that it will lead to a lot of change. It's just, I'm worried about how much damage it will cause between now and when that happens. When you hear about all of the stuff that's going on there, is it really a case of connectivity and really trying to make sure that if you have that platform, as much as you can, trying to open and give the opportunity for people to discover something new, a new author, a new voice, something that new of interest that is worth the reader's time?
Yeah, absolutely. And, this too is a very big question. It's connectivity, but it's also funding. It's also supporting independent bookstores. It's publishers, properly investing in supporting and marketing these authors. I think you and I see so much that, there's no real rhyme or reason why one book is given a lot of support and another book equally as compelling, equally well written, just kind of languishes. It doesn't really go anywhere. And I think, publisher support, a good amount of spend to, properly, market and push the word out about the book. I can't think anymore, but I think is really central. I think we need, at a governmental level, we need to have proper funding. Like there's this sort of this national cultural submission process that's happening in conjunction with the ASA at the moment, where a lot of authors are coming out and saying, the government needs to do something about AI. The government needs to properly fund, our artistic sector. We need to make sure that authors are properly remunerated. We all know the dire statistics of authors only earning on average something like $18,000 per annum. Nobody can afford to have an artistic career or, a literary career as a full-time career unless they already are, financially stable when they come to it. There's so much in that, and there are some people that have the ability to go, to go out and spruik their books and do go off their own bat and do book tours and speak to booksellers around the country, but most people don't. Most people just don't have the reach themselves, and so I think it's incumbent upon all sections of the Australian publishing and literary community to come together to ensure that Australian authors' voices are amplified above the internationals, and it should be a case of, you loved Heart the Lover, then you're going to love, this local author just as much, it's a complex question.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you raise a great point about the entire situation that's been happening. I mean, there's been a lot of discourse about the situation with Writers Victoria getting completely defunded, which is just incredible to me that is the case. And it's great to see that they got the signatures that they did to actually submit it to government, and actually creating those environments. I take confidence from, I will say that there is increasing indications about the actual value that art has. When I look at the situation like the basic income funding for the arts in Ireland, that has proven a massive success that everyone is taking notice of, where they basically didn't provide all income, but basically provided a very basic income for artists to be able to live and get by. And take that financial pressure off it. They did a trial with 2,000 artists, and they found that for every dollar they put in, which allowed the artists to focus on their craft and their work, they actually got $1.38 €38 in return. So it actually not only paid for itself, but also made a sizable amount of income back. If given the chance, the value of kind of prioritizing arts and giving artists a chance to do it. They've made that program permanent now. They did it as a trial. They're about to expand it and double the size of it in September. So I think, showing I have confidence and optimism. I mean, I'm realistic about the challenges that they say, because, as you correctly point out from the ASA figures, those you need to be able to have to make a living being a writer, and often writers don't. It's often a side hustle. Podcast for me is a side hustle. That's the reality of it. Same case in point. But I'm optimistic that, even though the world seems a little gloom out there, there is small pockets and things that are happening that show that if pointed in the right direction, creatives can surprise you. And that does give me, I'm realistic but optimistic.
Indeed. Well, I'm showing my optimism by continuing to write, even though there's very little chance of my book making it through this very onerous process. And then even if it does, the chance of it being successful are quite remote. But, writing and being involved in a creative industry is a leap of faith. It
is. And also, I wouldn't be disheartened even if you look at this whole situation with AI and go, oh, what's the point of writing? Write because it's fun. Right, because you enjoy it. Like, I think that's a key thing that you should always remember. Don't do it because, I'm worried about making money and X, Y, and Z. You're putting the business plan before the entire reason that you're doing it in the first place, which is it's fun. It's meant to be something that brings you joy. You have this story that you are compelled to put out there into the world. Just because there's, a situation going on with artificial intelligence doesn't mean that you still don't have your own voice that you can put on the page. Yeah. You absolutely can.
I agree.
Do it for you. That would be another key point. If any people are listening to this going like, well, what's the point of me writing because it's going to be taken by X, Y, and Z or whatever, you still have your own voice, and that can't be taken away.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more, Nick.
Hey everyone, Nick here. I'm excited to announce that I've launched a brand new book newsletter featuring book reviews, recommendations, latest news from the publishing world, opinion pieces, short stories, and more. One monthly newsletter, no spam, just the good book stuff. The sort of email you're glad shows up in your inbox. Sign up now for free, and for a small additional monthly fee, get early access to Date with a Debut episodes and exclusive content, including special extra episodes with our guests, Second Date, where they run another gauntlet of rapid-fire questions. Subscribe to my newsletter in the show notes below.
Nick, I kind of thought we might venture into a sort of, quick draw kind of question and answer session right now. So to start off with, what has been your favourite debut read so far this year?
It's so funny to get these questions put at me because doing a quick fire is something that I often do to other authors. So now I'm getting a recipe, like my own medicine served right back at me. So favorite debut read so far this year, genuinely an impossible question. This is cruel, and thank you very much for that. But there have been so many amazing debuts this year. And I've already shouted out a couple like Katie Hoskins and Melissa Sharman. There's another book that I want to shout out in this. It scratched a different itch for me. It really did. And that is Life Drawing by Emily Ligazzolo. So Emily, I knew Emily for years from my days at Booktopia. She'd been, she's established in the industry, working at a shed. And She did this litfic examination of women's bodies in this book. And the inspiration for it came from going to a life drawing class and, in her eyes, experiencing body neutrality for the first time ever. And it follows this romantic relationship over many years. The book is split up into 3 different parts. This romantic relationship between 2 people over the course of college and then marriage and then kids, but it also is an examination of the relationship women have with their own bodies, and that there's a lot of power associated with that. Time affects a woman's body a lot through children, through age. There's a lot of different associations assigned to women's bodies, in often negative connotations and implications through kind of patriarchal structures that have been around for such a long time. It was such a fascinating subject to dive into, and I think Emily did an amazing job with this book. And particularly if you're someone who has a challenging relationship with your own body, I give this one a shot, because I think it will touch on subjects and topics that I think need to be touched on, and I think will draw. She expresses things in ways about the human body that I'm so glad that someone put it onto the page. It's a fantastic book.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm looking forward to reading that too. What about a debut that is not yet out, but you're looking forward to reading?
Oh, yes. Okay, so I have a book for you, Claudine. I did an interview yesterday with an author called Jane R. Miles. Her book is a psychological thriller called Stay Buried. And this book floored me. It was phenomenal. I did a discussion with her. Her book is coming out at the end of July. Let me give you the pitch. December 1974, Darwin. What happened in December 1974 in Darwin?
Oh, wasn't Cyclone Tracy?
It was Cyclone Tracy. So on the eve of
74? I thought it was 71. Yeah, sorry.
74.
Yeah.
74.
Yeah.
Cyclone Tracy, a significant moment in Australian history occurred. At the same night, 4 young girls go missing and no one ever sees them. No one knows what happens to them. The entire story of this book is around how it cuts back and forth between what happened that night between these 4 women who suddenly disappeared, and then 30 years later, where the families come together. These women become known as the Angels of Darwin. No one knows what happened to them. There's a whole legend about them. But one of them comes back 30 years later. This story is incredible. We jump back and forth between these 2 different mindsets and viewpoints of what happened. And if you want a great psychological thriller that reveals things to you slowly, gradually, this is it. I finished the book and I had to sit in the darkness for a little while and contemplate it. It takes you to some tough places, but it is also an incredibly rewarding book. Comes out in July. Get it. Stay Buried. Stay Buried by Jane R. Miles.
Fantastic. Love that. Okay, moving on. What is your favorite book genre?
Oh, that's hard, because I doing the show, you get a new appreciation for different genres that I would not normally touch on, like romance and fantasy. My go-to is lit fic. I love a good literary fiction. I love books that kind of grab you and, shake you down and hold you in place. You are commanded to keep reading rather. And so psychological thrillers, drama. I love a good drama novel. Literary fiction is my jam. And funnily enough, anytime I go into that, even if my way in was like other breakout novels that kind of have that intensity, but even diving into other subjects, genres like sci-fi or fantasy kind of has been a way in through that kind of intensity of subject matter. A great example of that would be Animals in That Country by Laura Jean McKay. That is a foundational text for me. It's a book I've never ever had the chance to discuss. Also a debut novel, I will also add. That book floored me in terms of sheer intensity, but also diving into other subject matters. And for me, it's literary fiction, drama, thriller. I love that genre so much.
Brilliant. Next question, your favourite book to screen adaptation of an Australian book?
This is hard. These questions are hard. Now I can see why everyone goes, Nick, these quick fires are so hard. Why would you do this to yourself? So I'm getting my karma here. So it's a toss-up for two between me. A foundational text for me and for my book for When Men Cry was Wake and Fright. I was, floored by it, and my first experience was seeing the film. And it's an amazing film if you haven't seen it. It's absolutely incredible, set in the kind of country in the outback. It's kind of got a lot of the stereotypes that are often associated with Australian new wave cinema. It's so cinematic. It kind of captures that desolate feeling. A more recent one though, I'm torn between two. And I must say, I really loved The Dry, the film. I watched the film before I read the book. Which I kind of talked about when I had Jane. I was lucky enough to chat with Jane Harper, and she was like, "I don't judge whichever way you go about it, because the movie turns you on to can turn you on to the book. It can work both ways, like they're companion pieces." I thought that movie was really, really good, and even more so, I just loved how protective Eric Bana is of Aaron Falk. Like, he is protective of him. Also, the fact that he didn't have to learn an American accent. It made me realize how good the Australian accent actually is. So those would be my two answers to that question.
Oh, love it. Love it. Now, if you could have dinner with a debut Aussie author, who would you choose?
So it has to be a debut, like they've only put out one book?
No, I mean, I guess we'll change it to, if you could have dinner with an Aussie author, who would you choose?
Can they be dead or alive? I'm so changing the chat. I'm changing. Can they be dead or alive? It can be anyone?
Whomever you like.
Oh, then I have an answer then. John Marsden. John Marsden. He is, for me, he is it. I was very, very lucky to have him do a quote for my book for When Men Cry. And he, for me, like Norton's Hut was a transformational text. The Journey was a very important book in the context of my family. I mean, Tomorrow When the War Began. His books were beautiful. They treated, even though they were for a YA audience, they treated that YA audience with respect. They didn't sugarcoat the world. I miss that man very, very much. I miss him a lot. When he passed away, that was a very, very hard day, because he also was a very kind soul, and wasn't challenged. He had lots of challenges in his own life, and he didn't let that color the person who he was. So yeah, he would be the person I could sit and listen and just chat with him forever. I think I miss that man very, very much. So that's who I would have dinner with.
That's a beautiful answer, Nick. Thank you so much for sharing that.
That's okay. And in typical fashion, let's flip it on you now, because we have rapid fire questions. And let's throw that question back at you, actually. Let's do, for me, I've got a few. If you could have any three authors together at a dinner party? Let's do a dinner party scenario. Who would you pick, and why would you pick them?
Okay. Look, I would pick Diana Gabaldon, who is the author of the Outlander series, because I think not only is she incredibly successful, but she is super smart. And I might be shooting myself in the foot a little bit, because I probably wouldn't be up to, at her intellectual level, and probably wouldn't be able to converse with her. And she doesn't suffer fools lightly, but I think she's an incredible woman, and the success that she's had with the Outlander series and how prolific she is, and just how smart she is, really makes me want to sit her down and just have a chat about all things related to Outlander and her life generally. I mean, she's incredibly well educated. So she would be one. I have had the privilege of, speaking to Shankari Chandran a number of times in sort of very casual settings, and even on the podcast. But I feel like, she would be a match intellectually for Diana Gabaldon. I think without a doubt she would be an incredible dinner party guest. So I would have Shankari Chandran, and I would also have Holly Ringland, because I think Holly is the most beautiful human being. so genuine, so heartfelt, so genuinely joyful in her life that I think she would be the perfect complement to finish my party of 3 at this dinner table.
Phenomenal answers. I will say, like, Shankari Chandan is amazing. Was lucky enough to host her on a panel at the Newcastle Writers Festival talking about the power of place. Could have listened to her talk all day,
I know.
every day, about unfinished. I think that was unfinished business we talked about.
Yeah.
And God, Holly Ringland. I want Holly Ringland to come on the show. Like, she's in my top 3. I love her. I have so many questions about Holly to put to Holly, so I'm going to try and put that out into the ether, because I would love to have her on for like a Debut Revisited episode, and just talk to her about it, because I think she's got a new book coming out as well. So
She does in September. So
yeah,
would be the perfect opportunity for you to invite her onto the podcast. And she is just the most glorious guest. And you'd have to do very little work, because you just ask one question and it just pours out of her. Yes, I love it. I love it.
Putting it out into the ether.
Enjoy.
Yeah, putting it out into the ether officially now. What's on your TBR pile?
Oh, like you, Nick, I have a pile that goes beyond the height of my house. My husband is constantly building bookshelves for me to house all of the books that I have all over my floor and all over my desk. But to give you some idea, I currently have Aisha Inoon's new book, The Sisters of Serendib, on my TBR. I have The Society of Literary Marauders by Perth-based author Sasha Wasley. I have a new debut by Rachel Fox McLeod called Disgraceful. That's coming out soon. I have Dove by Georgia Harper. I have The Couples Retreat by Mercedes Mercier. I have The Bookshop of Buried Pasts by Sarah Clutton. And I have Billy King by Shannon Kelly White. That's just a small selection of the huge number of unread books on my TBR at the moment.
God, that is a list and a half. Like, I will say, that's one of the negatives of doing this show. Like, I'm so focused on the debut that then, like, you're on to the next debut and you don't realize, oh, people have actually continued to put out books, and so you get so far behind on their bibliography. It means at some point I'm going to have to go back and revisit it. Poor me. Oh, man.
Too many books and too little time.
So true. Off the back of that, do you have a favorite word?
Do I have a favorite word? I don't know if it's my favorite word, but it's probably my most used word, and it's absolutely. I say absolutely all the time. It's mortifying when I listen back to podcast episodes that I've recorded, how often I say this word. And I don't know how to stop myself from saying it.
It's a good word, I will say. Like, I think I've had absolutely on this, like, mentioned in answer to this question on the normal show a few times. It's a good word. It is a good word. Off the back of that, you and I do podcasts. There are so many crazy things that happen behind the scenes that never make it to live air. What's the craziest behind the scenes story that you've had while Talking Aussie Books?
Okay, I have two, and I have told this story a number of times. So for any listeners who've heard these stories before, I apologise in advance. But they are the two that stand out in my memory. Very early on, when I started Talking Aussie Books in 2018, I asked somebody I knew to come onto the podcast. I didn't know this person very well at the time, and we recorded the entire episode. I was so delighted with how it turned out. And then when I went to listen back, I realised that I hadn't pressed record. And so I started God, I went into a complete hot flush. My entire body was on fire. I broke out in this horrible sweat when I realized that I would have to ring this person up. I mean, they were doing it for free. I had no idea if it was, if anyone was going to listen. It was an utter shambles. So I had to ring this person and say, I'm so sorry, but it didn't record. Can we do it again? And like the true professional she was, she just went, yep, no problem. Let's just do it now. So we ran through it all and did it again, and it was brilliant. But from that day on, I never, ever, ever forgot to press record. And now I have it in big, bold letters across the top of my screen. press record. And I always say to authors when I start, I'm going to press record so I don't forget. And I always check that we're recording before we start asking questions. But that was just a pure rookie error. But it just showed me, and look, here I was trying to be professional and trying to be something I wasn't. Let's face it, at that time I had very little experience being a podcaster, and so it just felt to me that I had not only let myself down, but I had certainly let this author down by being less than professional in this space. But thankfully she was very understanding, and she was very happy to go through all of the questions again. But I could just sort of like hear the take the deep breath, and she was like, right, okay, this woman.
Look, at least I think everyone has.
Sorry, what was that?
I was going to say, I feel like everyone has kind of a story like that where you're about to start recording or whatever, or you make a recording and something goes wrong. Like, it sounds so easy when we're here recording it live, but it can sometimes be so chaotic.
I know, heart in your mouth kind of stories with this all the time. But my second story was with an author that I didn't know at all, and I was asked to interview him, and that was great. And he obviously was a very busy man, and he had a business to run, and it was clear to me that he had been asked to do the podcast, but he didn't know who I was. He didn't really. I don't think he knew much about the podcast either. And so it seemed to me that it was a bit of an inconvenience. And so he was recording the episode on a street corner. So basically he was talking to me on the phone on a street corner. There were buses going by, and there were, planes. He was in the middle of the city without a doubt, and the planes going overhead. There was a lot of traffic noise, and that was not a fun episode, I have to say to you. And I have subsequently gone on to talk to authors about how to prepare for interviews, and I use that as an example all the time, where I'm like, give it the time that it needs and deserves, because that person is taking the time to interview you in just the same way that we like to honor authors by being prepared. I think authors need to respect our time as interviewers, and respect the process, and at least sort of put yourself in a quiet room, that you're not going to be disturbed. I mean, interruptions happen. It's par for the course. The doorbell rings, or the postman arrives and the dogs start barking. That's stuff that you try as you might, you can't always account for. But this seemed like a deliberate kind of slap in the face to me, and I was too naive at the time to sort of say, okay, maybe you should go somewhere quieter and have, so that we can have a proper discussion. And to this day, I've not, like, I did post the episode, but I kind of thought to myself, I should have said no. I should have said I'm not going to do it. But when you don't know what you don't know when you start off, and so I just went ahead.
It's a good
stories.
It's good advice for it, I must say, because does feel like that sometimes. My final question, and probably the final question of this podcast as well. Are you happy?
I am happy, but I'm going to answer it this way. I was at a yoga class yesterday, and the yoga instructor stood up and quoted a philosopher who I'd never heard of before, and I can't even remember the name of this person. But this person's advice was not so much advice, but their mantra was that I am complete, but I am not finished. And I think that is the best way that I would describe my life. I am complete in so many ways. I have a beautiful home and family. I'm surrounded by beautiful friends. I have fulfilling work, but I am not finished yet.
That is a wonderful answer, and I love it, and it is so true as well. I should ask
you the same question, Nick.
So my answer would be, I am happy occasionally. I think it's best to be honest. So if I'm having a crap day, own it. There's nothing wrong with that, with those feelings. Often there's association. You've got to be happy all the time. Sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I'm not complete. Sometimes I'm frustrated. Being honest with yourself is the most important thing, in my opinion.
Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing that.
Well, thank you so much for coming on here. This brings us to the end of a very, very special episode. I've absolutely loved it. For everyone listening, if you haven't already, please go and check out Talking Aussie Books. I know that you absolutely love it. I'll provide a link in the description. And I'll say, Claudine, thank you so much. I cannot wait to tune into your next episode. I've been a long-time listener and admirer of the show. I'm sorry I haven't got the mug here with me, but it is still there. I still own it. And I can't wait to see what happens next, both with Talking Aussie Books and what comes next in your upcoming literary activities.
Thank you so much for having me on the show, Nick.